Production underwriting for Ruckus has been made possible in part by the generous contributions from Fred and Lou Hartwig and from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon, joined by the Ruckettes, Yael Abou-Hakka, editorial writer for the Kansas City Star, Gwen Grant, president and CEO of the Urban League, media and communications consultant Mary O'Halloran, and back from the legislative session in Jeff City, lobbyist Woody Cozad. Well, it's quite a week that includes news stories about both Jay Nixon and Dick Nixon. Let's start with Jay and the Missouri legislature that concluded business last Friday. In a scathing editorial, the Kansas City Star echoes the sentiment of Northwest Missouri State Senator Brad Lager, a Republican, that the General Assembly is no longer capable of dealing with tough issues. The Star complains about the Republican-controlled body's unwillingness to pass Medicaid expansion or provide economic development measures for Kansas City or clean up what it calls the state's tawdry political culture. The editorial says it was a productive session for gun owners and wealthy individuals who will benefit from income tax cuts. For most everybody else, the session was a bust. But Woody, I would guess Republican legislators don't share that judgment.
Well, Senator Lager is unhappy, and rightly so, that they were unable to do anything about tax credit reform, which is something he's been working on for a long time without success. And he's right. Something needs to be done about it. But take, for example, and I don't want to bore with people what this is about particularly, but the Second Injury Fund and occupational disease under workers' compensation. This involves the base constituencies of both parties are deeply interested in it. They are hostile to one another's points of view as they can be. The legislature's been working on it for 4 years at least, and this year they actually came up with a solution to both of those issues, altered the work comp law, altered the Second Injury Fund. This does not benefit the rich or gun owners. It helps working people in the state. It's an extremely difficult issue to deal with. They did a great job. Yeah. I mean, it was a model of good legislation that they arrived at, and to say that they didn't do anything after something like that.
The Republican leadership said it was a very successful session.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about a couple, though, of the key issues. There was a lot of debate about Medicaid expansion, that part of Obamacare that the Supreme Court said would be left up to the states. You can take it or leave it. Missouri said leave it.
Yeah, along with about 25 other states. So this is, you can call this some kind of extreme position. Look, the belief among Republican legislators is that Medicaid, the original Medicaid, the old Medicaid, was a deal that the federal government was going to pay for most of and all this. And in the end, it came to the point where we had to change the qualifications, and the Star and the Post-Dispatch screamed about that. If we hadn't done it in this last recession, I don't know what condition the state would have been in. Now they're saying, oh, we'll pay for this for the first 2-3 years. Well, gee, that's great, but where do we get the money after that? And you're broke, federal government, so your promise to pay for it for eternity is no good. They're worried about signing on to this thing. The Hospital Association, of course, wanted it because it will enrich them tremendously. They say they're all on the verge of bankruptcy, but they netted $871 million in the last year we have numbers for. It just is a leap they don't want to take, and I don't blame them one bit.
Now, there were gradual cuts in income tax rates approved over the next decade. According to what I read, it says as long as annual revenues continue to rise, this would be the first income tax cut since the 1920s in Missouri.
Yeah, first income tax rate reduction in 92 years. Think about that for a second. War, peace, good trade balance, bad trade balance, depression, recession, boom. Whatever it is, Missouri's answer is tax rates never go down. That's purblind ideological obstinacy is all that is. So we finally got a very slight tax cut phased in over a number of years. There has to be $100 million revenue growth in any year or the phase-in doesn't happen that year. There's a $1,000 deduction for those making under $20,000 that does not now exist. And since you start paying the top bracket at $9,000, that's a good thing. And then there's an across-the-board income tax rate reduction that affects everybody in the state.
Okay, we're about out of time. Got a minute or so. I'd like each of you to take a shot at what happened with the Missouri legislature. Yeah?
Well, so he gets to say that they did the second injury fund, which, you know, affects a few people, but they didn't do Medicaid, which affects 100,000. They didn't do the roads, which affects millions. They didn't do a lot of other things that on education. I agree that it's nice to talk about Medicaid expansion, look at other states that didn't do it. And yet, a lot of other Republican-led states found innovative ways to do it. Missouri didn't.
I agree with you, Yale. Also, to say that they were successful, you know, it's about who's evaluating that. I certainly agree with the representative who said that that it was a failure in their session because they didn't accomplish very much of anything of substance and importance. You pass tax reforms for the wealthy and not take care of Medicaid. You don't fully fund the education, the foundation formula for education, while giving these this tax relief is really problematic. I think they were very inefficient in this session.
Quickly.
Oh. They said it.
Okay.
Wow.
That's great. In last week's column, Yale complained that the Old Boys Club is back in charge of the most important political seats in the Kansas City area. He points to a time not long ago when women were mayors of Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas City, Kansas, and held key government posts in Clay and Platte counties. And he also complains there are few women at the top of local businesses. Yale overlooks his employer, where the editorial page editor and the publisher are both women. Nonetheless, Gwen, Yale says men have a tight grip on power in Kansas City, and there is no evidence to suggest that change is in the air. Now, I consider you a powerful woman in Kansas City. Do you think Yale is right about this?
Yeah, I think he's pretty right on about it. I think you have to look at it in two contexts. One, political power, political leadership, and the other with regard to business leadership. And on the political side, I think it's more cyclical because, you know, as you just stated, you could go back about 8 to 12 years and you see that we had women in leadership at, you know, Mayor Barnes, Marinovich. We had, at the same time, we have Clara McCaskill is our senator from Missouri. We have, and we forgot about Jean Peters Baker, who is elected as Jackson County prosecutor now. We have 2 state senators right now, Kiki Curls and Jolie Justice, who are female. So, you know, it's a cyclical thing from a political perspective. With regard to business, however, I mean, it's just blatantly obvious. You know, where do you look at the Civic Council? There are no women when in leadership roles. When you look at the Chamber of Commerce and all of the key leadership positions within the chamber.
Well, but why? And does it make a significant difference?
Well, I think it's important that women have the opportunity to lead at the top of these major corporations. You don't find us in the boardroom. You don't find us as CEOs. You know, even when you look nationally, the numbers are pretty low. It's hard to pierce that glass ceiling. Now, Yale in his column referenced some things that, you know, are somewhat sexist in terms of, you know, women write smaller checks when it comes to the political process, and women are, you know, we want to be more domestic. Those kinds of things, you know, and I think those things that women want to be more domestic, want to be, you know, we have to be moms and executives all at the same time, are things that
Yale, you being sexist in your column by saying women write smaller checks?
No, he made a reference. I said, I'm not saying he was being, the comment.
Is that sexist?
That women write smaller checks?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think women are used to writing the big checks that mean, hey, I'm going to get somebody.
Well, a lot of us men are not either.
Brothers are not sisters, for example.
One of the reasons for the big check issue is that men control the PACs that write the big checks.
Just summarize what you were talking about in the column, what you were trying to get across to people, what kind of reaction you got.
Well, I mean, politically, with even just a few exceptions that Gwen matter, locally, there really aren't that many powerful women in politics anymore. And it may be cyclical. It also may be lasting for the next 10 or 15 years. It's certainly not going up again after a few years. And on the financial or corporate side, there's nobody. I mean, you look at the top 40 CEOs in town as far as making money, and they're not there. And certainly, and I pointed out in this column because I did it 18 months ago. Yeah, there's Mia Parrish at the Star, and there's you know, a couple of Federal Reserve, but they're not the CEOs of Hallmark, and they're not on the Civic Council, which you also mentioned, which has a lot of sway.
Yeah. Is it by design or just the result of the way life has been?
You know, well, I don't know about the way life has been, but
circumstance.
somebody asked me, are you saying this is really bad? What's wrong with men leading it? I said, well, I think given the recession we've had in the last few years, that doesn't mean that men are great corporate leaders. You know, just for example, so why not let women have the chance to do so?
Well, okay, Mary.
Well, the women's movement is alive and well, Yale, and just look around a little closer. My district in Kansas, in Prairie Village, I'm represented by 2 women, one of which is an outspoken feminist supporter of women's rights and so on. And thank you for mentioning Jean Peters Baker and the state senators. However, we don't have a situation where the whole metro was being governed by very strong, powerful, outspoken women. What I do take hope in, however, Yale, is take a look at the United States Senate. For the first time, and this is for our listeners to show you what the women's movement can do when change comes around. The Armed Services Committee now has a majority of women in the Senate. Who would have thought it? And guess what's happening? Major change for women in the armed forces because of that. They're not afraid to bring this question, Mike, of sexual abuse of women in the military by their superiors out into the open. It's shocking, and it's crazy, and it's criminal. And they're not afraid to work together to change it. So I take heart in those victories, and I agree with you, Gwen. It's cyclical, this women's movement of ours.
When will we see the cycle change and swing the other direction?
Oh, I don't know. When
some women
Kay Barnes' daughter runs for
again. I mean, really.
Or Kay runs again. All right. Despite the regular assurances from some that voter fraud is a relic of the past, there's at least one Kansas City area example that seems to disprove that. In the 2010 Democratic primary for the Missouri House 19th District, John Rizzo won by 1 vote, defeating Will Royster. Despite Royster's legal appeals and challenges, the decision stood. Rizzo served a full term and has now been reelected. The 1-vote victory was supplied by Rizzo's uncle, John Moratina, who has pleaded guilty in federal court. Does this incident tell us anything significant about vote fraud or the need for stricter voter ID laws? Yale.
Well, I would say that it's problematic on several different levels, so let me get to them very quickly. 1, did voter fraud occur? Well, the feds say it did, so it must have. 2, does that mean that the voter fraud laws that all the Republicans are trying to pass would have changed this? Right now, based on what we know, well, no. I mean, the guy had a valid driver's license, been in the country forever. He could have had many different reasons for saying, well, here's my voter ID, and oh, well, a different address. Well, no, I'll sign provisional, whatever. That would not necessarily stop this particular case.
A photo ID law would have had no effect,
I mean, that's again, based on what we know.
Yeah.
Now, the problematic part to me, which I guess is on the pro-Royster, anti-Rizzo side, is several different groups. I mean, a judge looked into this, a special master of the Missouri House looked into it, and nobody sided with Royster. Everybody kind of sided with Rizzo. So they certainly didn't look at it maybe with the fervor that they could have. And then the final thing is, at some point, where's John Rizzo's credibility in all this? Well, with me, personally, it's very low right now. You know, I mean, because during this whole thing, it was, oh, no, everything's fine. You know, when questions were asked about his relatives, oh, no, everything's fine there. What did he know and when did he know it would be a question that if I were, you know, one of his constituents, which I'm not, I'd say, well, I'm not quite sure that you were being very honest with it. So I think the whole instance is problematic. I think voter fraud is certainly a part of this. But I don't think this particular case proves, oh, well, now we have whites have voter fraud. This is how to stop it. That's all I'm saying.
Woody, you're quoted in the Kansas City Star news story about this. You say something to the effect of, Pendergast era may be over, but that doesn't mean vote fraud is no longer part of our lives.
The temptation to commit vote fraud will always be there.
Yeah.
So people will, sooner or later, in some instances, yield to that temptation. The position that the Democrats take is that it's just non-existent and nothing for us to worry about, and that's not true. We had an election, 2 elections actually, stolen on the same day back in the mid-'80s in Kansas City in a Democratic primary, which, by the way, it's interesting the Republicans are the ones excited about it. That's where vote fraud generally occurs, in Democratic primaries when it does occur. So, look, the Rizzo case, the other way to take the same set of facts that Yale gave us, which is incomplete, is that, in fact, the ID might have caught him. He might have voted provisionally, and then the check might have been done to see if he was right. And that might have turned the whole way this election turned out, because there's only one vote. There's also the question of his spouse, who also voted in this election, which then turns the election. The rumor floating around in political circles is that part of the deal that was cut for the guilty plea was that the wife would not be charged. Now, that may or may not be true, but she voted in this election. That makes two people from out of district, and that means it wasn't a tie. He lost by one vote. Mary.
Well, let me put the Democratic side of the voting situation in Missouri out here for discussion. First of all, the most important issue right now facing voters for good, strong election reform in Missouri is whether or not we're going to have early voting. Now, we have a Secretary of State in the state now who appointed a bipartisan commission. They came back and said, you bet, we ought to have early voting, proposed a bill, got a bill, and had a Republican endorse it and sponsor it in the legislature, and it went nowhere. If you want more people voting, and by the way, Matt Blunt, former governor of this state and former Secretary of State, supported this point of view. He said early voting shortens the lines and reduces any chance that kind of strange things happen. This guy, uncle, by the way, of John Rizzo, what you have is a situation of a family member trying to help his nephew out. Name the next crime.
But yeah, if it's illegal.
They did. Well, you know, he got caught, and so the system worked. And
no, it did not. Royster didn't get in office, and Rizzo did.
Well, you know, they had who they have looking into.
Well, anyway, we got to wrap this up.
Early voting.
There's an organization called True the Vote that says, and you can argue with what they say, more than 24 million voter registrations are invalid nationwide, and there are over 1.8 million dead voters still eligible on the rolls across the United States. I pointed out last week that the trio of troubles facing President Obama, Benghazi talking points, IRS overreaching, and the Justice Department grasp of AP phone records has several analysts offering comparisons to the Nixon presidency. The idea really got rolling when legendary journalist Bob Woodward said on national TV that none of the crises has reached Watergate levels yet, but the editing of the Benghazi talking points does seem Nixonian.
I have to go back 40 years to Watergate when Nixon put out his edited transcripts of the conversations, and he personally went through them and said, oh, let's not tell this, let's not show this.
Woodward, along with Carl Bernstein, were the Washington Post reporters who uncovered the Watergate scandal that led to President Nixon's resignation. Mary, should we take Woodward's views seriously about this?
Not necessarily. You know, these guys have their books to write, and God knows I would never want to take anything from Carl Bernstein or Bob Woodward. You know, they were the best reporters on inside presidential politics we've ever had, I think. But so, what's the question?
Why were the Benghazi talking points edited 12 times before they got to the general public and were wrong when they got there?
I'm very surprised that it was only 12 times. When you have, unless you explain to the American people what this was about, it's almost impossible not to just jump to these wild Republican conclusions that, oh my gosh, President Obama, who's, by the way, his popularity ratings are still above 50% and haven't gone down because of this. You had a situation where you had a ambassador killed. We had an outpost, not an embassy, attacked by terrorists.
We know what happened in Benghazi generally. We're not relitigating that. We want to know about the effect of people like Woodward coming out and saying, this is Nixonian.
He's not the only one. What Woodward's talking about.
The administration, the president's being criticized by Republicans and by Democrats, liberals, and conservatives.
Mike, if you just let me express
myself. Well, Mary, get on the topic here.
I will get on the topic. There's nothing Nixonian about a president, about the CIA and the State Department arguing over what ought to be said about what happened, because they didn't know what happened by that time. Secondly, if you really think that President Obama was engaged in this, he wasn't. No president sits and writes
I think that's
talking
one of the
points.
criticisms. He was not engaged in it, and as commander-in-chief, you know, he wasn't engaged.
Presidents don't
apparently.
write talking points.
No. But they are involved in what is said to the public on their behalf. Yes, Woody.
Rarely.
It was either
Rarely,
Carney or
never.
the Secretary of State spokesman who made a passing reference to a phone call between the President and the Secretary of State. Within an hour after that, for the very first time, we got a statement released that referred to this video. For a week after that became the administration story, that this attack was in fact a demonstration that got out of hand in response to an anti-Islamic video. That cockamamie story about the anti-Islamic video first appears an hour after the Secretary of State talks to the President. Now, well, I'm sorry, this is just a fact, and so, you know, you say the president isn't involved in this, like it was all done by his minions. We're not absolutely sure of that yet, and what really the point Woodward is making is this, that this thing keeps coming apart one layer at a time.
You got three things going on. You got the IRS, you got the AP and other news reporters situation being their calls being taken and checked by. How about you? Do you care about that?
Say it's Nixonian, please.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. All three of them are quote scandals. Yeah. Okay, let's say let's adjust to those are scandals. Well, like Nixon, was Obama involved in any of them? When Benghazi were not, well, IRS, I'm sorry, there's no proof of any IRS.
None.
And the AP, it's the Department of Justice, doing stuff that's legal, that probably shouldn't be legal, but they did stuff that was legal. Now, and the final, Obama's thing is, maybe to Woody's point, well, I didn't know this was going on. Well, maybe he needs to be more involved in knowing what's going on.
Yeah, but that's not scandalous, and it's not against the law. But the important thing about that he didn't know everything that was going on. The important thing about this Nixonian reference is that Nixon was all up in the mix, involved in the bribery, involved personally in the editing and all of that. Right now, you have no evidence that has occurred with
Nixon
Obama.
knew nothing about Watergate, which was the beginning of it all.
The biggest challenge for President Obama is that he ran on a platform of transparency, and he has not lived up to that.
Thank you.
So that's not a scandal. It is about, this is how I said I was going to behave, and he hasn't.
Let me just, by the way, on the AP thing, they filed
a scandal.
Deceitful affidavit.
The scandal in Benghazi.
That's a crime.
The scandal in Benghazi is about security, and that the CIA and the State Department and our military can't figure out how to protect outposts in countries full
The military was prepared to go.
No, they weren't.
Oh, yes, they were. They said they were. They were told to stand down.
New York Times said to the ambassador, do you want help? And the
this topic has ended. New York Times. We're finished. We're finished. Understand? Now, New York Times editorial page says that what's going on is threatening the fundamental freedoms of the press. New York Times editorial, and a Fox News poll says 68% of the American people think the federal government is out of control. Now it's time for Roast and Toast, where we try to hold up or beat down people and events in the news. We start tonight with Woody.
A toast to Senator Bob Dixon of Springfield, Missouri, state senator, and a simultaneous roast of the Children's Division in the Department of Social Services. Senator Dixon discovered that social workers were spending, because of an antiquated computer system, inordinate amounts of time entering records instead of being able to get out and work on their cases and get to the kids they need to be working with. And so he proposes to give them the necessary funds to update this computer system and free up their social workers. And the Department of Social Services sends their guy over to say, no, if you're not going to expand Medicaid, we don't want your damn money. You can stick your money where the sun doesn't shine. We won't spend it on those computers even if you give it to us. And so they didn't get the money, and they aren't looking after the kids. This is the politics of petulance. It's got to stop. I mean, it's just crazy.
Well, on a more positive note, I'm going to toast the stellar students in the Urban Leagues. I'm taking a little personal privilege here to salute stellar students in the Urban League's Project Ready College Readiness Program. And they graduated this year, and they graduated with honors, and I'm going to just take a minute and name them. We have Miss Deja Canada, who graduated from Lincoln College Prep and will be attending Missouri University on a full-ride scholarship. Miss Aaliyah Diggs, graduating from ACE Academy as salutatorian with a 4.0 GPA and going to Spelman University. And Mr. Nashawn Thomas, graduating in the top 10% at Sumner Academy with a full-ride scholarship to Tuskegee University. Congratulations to these fine students.
Well, I'm going to have to go back to the dark side with Woody, and that is in the legislature in Topeka. Absolutely unbelievable lack of transparency, Woody. Even you would get upset about this. For the last several weeks, the legislators, some legislators, we're not even sure whom, have been deciding the tax policy for the state. How many millions of tax dollars will be cut and shifted to the shoulders of those at the lower end of the economic scale. No open meetings, no press conferences, no real reports to the press on a regular basis. Nobody knows what they're doing, and nobody's really asking. That's scandalous in Topeka.
I yield my time to try to end the show on time. See everybody in a month.
And I wouldn't possibly have time to do a roast or toast because time has been used. So thanks to all of you for watching. We'll be away until June the 20th to accommodate special programming, special events on KCPT. We'll see you back here Thursday, June the 20th. On behalf of the Rockettes, Mike Shannon, thanks for watching and good night.